This is why the steering is so vague and there's a clunking noise going over bumps. I mean, this is the original suspension from 1993. So to fix this, the first thing I did was remove the axle nut, so I hammered out the indented part. That way I could loosen up the nut completely, so it comes off all the way. Next I removed the brake caliper as well as the rotor, and that was rust welded to the hub, so it needed a little bit of persuasion to come off. Then I removed the upper control arm from the top of the knuckle, and I kept the nut on there as I hammered, and that'll prevent the stud from mushrooming. That way it comes right out. With that removed, we had to remove the lower control arm from the knuckle. This had a rusty cotter pin, so I pulled it out with some pliers, and then removed the nut completely. And I wanted to show you guys another method of popping the stud out of the knuckle, so I used a ball joint removal tool, and you just tighten it until the stud pops loose. And now you can see the knuckle comes right out. Finally, the last thing holding this knuckle in was a tie rod, so I loosened that up, and then hammered the stud upwards to break it free. And just like that, the tie rod could come off, and now the knuckle could be removed. Then I removed the tie rod from the steering rack, followed by removing the worn out strut, as well as the clunky axle. And finally, I unbolted the lower control arm so it could be removed. So out with all the old suspension parts, and in with the new ones. So next I had to rebuild the knuckle, and I started by hammering out the old hub, like so, then hammering out the old bearing, and finally hammering out the old ball joint, like so. Next I painted the knuckle and strut fork, that way they look brand new. And I also painted the underside of the wheel well, so not only does this look good, but it's going to stay rust free for years to come. After everything dried, I added the new parts to the knuckles, starting with the ball joint. You just use the cup and ball joint press and then tighten down the press until the ball joint bottoms out like so. Then you add your snap ring to the other side to hold it in place. Next I installed a new wheel bearing, and this gets pressed in a similar fashion to the ball joint. And once it bottoms out, you put the snap ring to hold it in place. Then we could add the hub and press it into the bearing like so, and now the knuckle is fully rebuilt. So back at the car, I installed a new tie rod, as well as the new upper control arm, and torqued that to spec. Then the new strut went in and got torqued to spec, followed by the new axle, which you need to make sure it gets pushed all the way into the transmission. And then with the axle in, the lower control arm could be installed, and I torqued that to spec as well. And finally, the knuckle could be installed, making sure the axle splines line up, and then just give it a push, and then you could put the ball joint into the lower control arm. Good. Now with the knuckle in place, let's come over to the tie rod and get that installed. So slide the tie rod end into the knuckle, hand tighten the nut, and torque it to spec. Then we need to slide in our cotter pin and bend both ends of the cotter pin around the nut. That way the nut can't come loose. Same thing with the lower ball joint. I got that nut on there, torqued it to spec, and added the cotter pin. After that was installed, the last thing to do was to tighten down the upper ball joint. So I pushed the stud through the knuckle and torqued it down. Alright, so all that was left to do was add the new brake rotor, install the refreshed brake caliper, torque it to spec, and then install the brake pads. Now, I couldn't just reuse the old dry rotted tires and the steel wheels, which look